director of the place.
That is Lu Yandong, China's state councillor. She's one of China's highest ranking officials. She's the only female on the Politburo. Back in February, at the 14th EU-China summit, the two sides agreed on a new accord, known as the EU-China High-Level People-to-People Dialogue. This is the launch event, where talks were held behind closed doors and no press conference was organised. There was, however, a concert and a cocktail reception. China expert Professor Christopher Dent from Leeds was invited. He admits that despite these niceties, these events are crucial for EU-China relations.
It's very important, I think, because if you take an aggregation of these things together, it's socialising Europeans and Chinese, it's improving understanding, it's kind of developing relationships. So on their own they may not look very significant, but if you aggregate them together with the vast array of other kind of people-to-people dialogues that are going on between the EU and China, you know, the sum of those things is actually very important. I think there's a realisation both on the Chinese and also the European side that we don't really know each other well enough, we don't understand each other well enough to take the relationship further forward. So we do need to have new initiatives such as those announced today about bringing together different groups of people from Europe and China, simply just to get to know each other, look at what common interests they have, what differences they have between them, what common challenges they have in the 21st century. Both China and the EU have great global responsibilities, given their stature in the global community. So they don't just owe it to each other to develop a closer relationship, a deeper understanding, and a platform for partnerships, but they owe it to the wider world, because what happens between the EU and China has implications for other nations and societies. I would say that the relationship is becoming increasingly interdependent, in that we have a growing number of shared interests and challenges that we face, and the connections between us are growing all the time, whether it's businesses, whether it's people travelling from Europe to China, China to Europe, whether it's things like technical structures, infrastructures, markets, the things that we face at a global level, global governance, where we meet, G20 forum, for example, now that China's become a member of this. So the points of contact and the connections and the networks between Europe and Asia, Europe and China, are growing all the time, which requires us to manage those connections and interdependencies. So really we've got no choice but to become closer partners.
That means a healthy Eurozone is in the interest of China, and having China as a close friend is in the interest of Europe.
China has the largest amount of foreign exchange reserves of any nation by far in the world. 3.54 trillion US dollars. A lot of those, though, are locked into holding US denominated assets like US Treasury bills, but China still does own a lot of euros in its foreign exchange portfolios. And it could easily switch, I presume, over maybe a long-term process, its holdings of foreign exchange reserves increasingly into euros, or provide credit lines for the Eurozone. So we'll wait and see. I think that obviously the Chinese have to be very careful about what decisions they make. There's to be a consultation process with the Europeans about terms and conditions and schedules.
Up till now, EU-China relations have mostly been based on money and trade. Today's event dwells on a new area, that of culture, to overcome the major culture shocks for the Chinese in Europe and the Europeans in China.
The biggest cultural shock I had was when I first visited China back in the early 1990s, actually as a tourist. We arrived on a bus from the train station at Guangzhou after coming from Hong Kong. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. There was a traffic jam in all the streets in Guangzhou. On the streets, I saw people selling everything. There was a dentist. There were goods just thrown onto the street, selling stuff. There was a man with a table and a telephone, just offering his telephone to passers-by. He was selling that as a service. It was just phenomenal, and it reminded me actually of the kind of Wild West capitalism that the United States went through in the 19th century. The thing you have to remember is that Asians generally have a much stronger work ethic, East Asians have a much stronger work ethic than most Western societies. It's not just the Chinese. In China itself, you have a very long-standing merchant class on the coastal and southern parts of the country. So this is not something new. They've always been very entrepreneurial, very hard-working, invest a lot in education and human capital development generally. So whereas in Europe we have a strong kind of leisure ethic, you could say, in many Asian countries, including China, the work ethic is still very, very strong compared to ours. I think there's increasingly acknowledgement in China that they can't continue with their old development model, one of based on energy-intensive industrialization, just satisfying the material prosperity needs of its people. With the growing middle class in China, they're more interested in kind of non-material lifestyle, kind of life care issues, such as clean air for their children to grow up in, good quality utility services, having the ability to travel, move around from one place to another, and having an economy that is more innovative and different generally. I do believe that we're at the start of a long-term trend towards that kind of more innovative, experimental society and economy in China.